We're good now. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And Tim, thank you. Jane, thank you. We have a great panel. I mean, it's truly a very, very good panel to address our topic this evening. We have David Amster. Dave is chair of the Advisory Council of Managing Agents of the Building and Realty Institute. He is also a member of the Board of Trustees of the BRI. He is a longtime chair of the Building and Realty Institute Negotiating Committee for its labor contract negotiations with Local 32 BJ Service Employees Union, and he is a principal of Prime Locations. We also have with us Ken Finger. He is a principal of Finger & Finger, a professional corporation of White Plains. And of course, Finger & Finger is chief counsel to the Building and Realty Institute and its 7 component associations. Also joining us on the panel this evening is Charles Marino. He is the principal of Braxton Engineering, which has offices in Bronxville and in New York City. Charles has been on our radio show several times, as have Dave and Ken Finger and Jason, our next guest. And Charles is very knowledgeable on this topic. He's done hundreds and hundreds of projects involving exterior and interior work for New York City and Westchester County buildings. So he is definitely an appropriate guest. And last, but of course not least, is Jason Schiciano, co-president of Levitt-Fuirst Insurance. Levitt-Fuirst, of course, is the insurance manager for the BRI and its 7 component associations. Jason has been a speaker at many CCAC membership meetings and BRI meetings in the past. So that is our panel. Again, a very, 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 very knowledgeable panel. We will start, Tim, if it's okay with you, and Jane, we'll start with David Amster as our first speaker from a managing agent point of view.
Okay, David, I have unmuted you. You may be muted on your own.
I'm unmuted at the moment, so.
Perfect, you're ready to go.
Okay. So thanks for having me, by the way. I think it's a really important topic because it also becomes a little bit of a contentious topic sometimes between managing agents and co-op boards on the contractors that they want to hire and use at a property. And it's getting more and more complicated today than it's ever been in terms of who we should hire and looking for contractors. So, first and foremost, I think it's really, really important that the contractor that you pick is qualified to do the work. This means you got to make sure that they're properly licensed if it's required for, electricians, plumbers, riggers, things along those lines. And most importantly, that they have the proper insurance coverages for the specific jobs that they're going to be doing. I've seen many times boards have, a general contractor or somebody who they, use consistently in a building, and then an issue comes up and, they got a little bit of a roof leak, and why can't we hire, John to do the roof, fix the roof? Well, probably because John doesn't have the proper insurance to do the roof or facade type of repair. So this has become very, very complicated. I'm sure, you have to rely on your professionals to really vet a contractor properly. And I'm sure later in the presentation, Jason will have a lot to say on, how to properly vet a contractor on their insurance level. I think it's also very important that, the managing agent personally vet any new contractors that they come across at a property. And what I mean by that is not just for their insurance and their licensing, which is obviously easy to get, but to personally meet with them and make sure you have the, things that are very important at times. You should always meet with the principal of the company. You should always make sure you have the cell phone number for the principal of the company, because just in case Murphy visits the property at any one time and something goes wrong, you can get in contact quickly and effectively with somebody who has a say in, what's going on over there. It's also important for boards to understand, and this is where sometimes we get a little contentious as well, is that not every job really needs to be bid out. There are a lot of small jobs out there jobs under $1,000. And I've had boards come to me and say, well, we have this job. It's about, it's a plumbing job. We want to get 3 bids for it. And realistically, it's very difficult, especially these days, to get contractors to show up and actually bid on a very, and I say small jobs, those are generally jobs under, say, $5,000. And it's very difficult. And the more times you bring contractors out and they don't get the job, the less times those contractors will want to work in buildings. And sometimes there's very talented people out there to do it. Now, I don't mean you shouldn't be cautious of what, pricing is, but I think your managing agent has a general idea what, like hour, etc. And it's not always practical to go bid jobs that are not, substantial, or at least at a minimum level. I also think that, everyone has to understand their role in the process of establishing a relationship with the contractor. Who's running the job? Who's in charge of making sure the job is done properly? Obviously, managing agents are paid to deal with contractors on a day-to-day basis, but sometimes board members get involved in with contractors too. And unfortunately, sometimes more than one board member may get involved with a contractor. So the contractor has to have a key person that they deal with on a day-to-day basis at the job to make sure that not too many people are, mixing the soup, so to speak. And I also think that, communication is very, very important, and that, everybody should have, when dealing with hiring a contractor, boards have to be aware of what, the contractor is capable of doing. The contractor has to be vetted. And, today the insurance is becoming so complicated. We just had there's a major insurance program out there, I'm sure Jason will talk about, where not only does the insurance company have a person who they want to receive a copy of the contract before it's signed by the board, but they want to vet the insurance on the contractor. And it's gotten to the point where it's so complicated, the contractor, quite honestly, myself as a managing agent, can't delve that deeply into it. And I think you have to leave it up to the insurance professionals to deal with making sure the insurance is adequate for the specific job that needs to be done.
Great. Thank you so much for that, David. I think Ken Finger is our next speaker. So Ken, I'm going to unmute you now.
I will also unmute myself. Thank you very much. Thank you, David. I thought that was right on point. I would, before we start, like to take the opportunity to congratulate Jane Curtis, our new chairperson of the CCAC Council. Jane has taken over and replaced Cesar Manfredi, who was there for a short period of time, sort of holding the lamp up, and had taken over from Diane Verrill, who brought the CCAC out from the wilderness, so to speak, and made the CCAC, I think, the most vibrant and active of all the councils, with regular meetings, regular programs, and a relatively large membership. And I think that kudos should go to Diana Verrill for the years she spent as chairperson. And we look now forward to Jane Curtis' tenure, who brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to the CCAC. She's been involved in a positive manner for years and will surely take the CCAC, in our judgment, to a new and further level as the, again, the most vibrant board and council of the BRI. So congratulations, Jane, and we look forward to working with you for years in the future. Now I guess I'll go on to the subject at hand, which is again, the relationships that we foster here in regard to guidelines in the construction and the dealings between the various entities here. We have actually 3 entities. We have the boards and the co-ops or condos. We have the contractors, and we have the shareholders or the unit owners. And we have to deal with all three. And now, of course, we have a fourth entity, COVID-19, that we have to deal with. So what I'd like to do first is just go through the basics and then maybe get a little bit into the impact that COVID-19 has had on the construction and renovations in the buildings. What we're talking about here is having a process and a procedure. I'm sure that almost all the co-ops and condos that are represented here tonight have a alteration or a renovation agreement. If you don't, the first thing you should do when you wake up tomorrow morning is contact your attorney and get a alteration or renovation agreement for your particular entity, your co-op or your condo or your homeowners association. And that agreement should have a number of things that are included there. I won't steal Jason's thunder by going into the insurance requirements, but obviously the first and most important aspect is that whatever contract you use, as David mentioned, must have proper insurance. And I'm sure Jason will give us the proper requirements for the insurance that should be had by the contractor. You should have a formal agreement between the co-op shareholder and you or unit owner and the contractor. It should not be a mere proposal from the contractor that is signed off on by the shareholder. It should be a real and regular contract that both parties acknowledge and put forth your specific rights and responsibilities vis-a-vis each other in that agreement. It could be a short agreement, it could be 2 or 3 pages, it could be 5 pages, but it's important that you have the basics. And what should those basics be? Well, number one, obviously, as we've talked about, the insurance should be there. Secondly, there should be a requirement that the contractor get a permit from the local municipality, a building permit, to do the type of renovation or work that's going to be done in the building. You should require that the plans and specifications for the work be submitted to the board of directors or the board of trustees or the managing board of managers if it's a condominium. And those plans and specs should be reviewed by the board. If it's a complicated job or it looks like there may be some structural changes, then the board should retain at the expense of the shareholder or unit owner its own architect and engineer to review those specifications and make sure that they don't affect the building systems, for example. You don't want anything that's going to impact on the building systems. And you want to make sure that there are no structural issues. If you're going to be removing walls or things of that nature, you want to make sure that it's not a load-bearing wall, and that should be reviewed by an engineer or an architect. Obviously, there should be board approval before any work starts. And prior to the board approval or after the board approval, you must have the municipality work permit granted, which should specify exactly what's going to be done. And at the end of the job, the contractor must get a CO, certificate of occupancy, or certificate approving the work from the local municipality. There should be a requirement that if there's any damage or loss to the co-op or the building, that the insurance cover it, and if it doesn't, there should be indemnification provided from the shareholder and the contractor to the co-op or condominium. There should be an agreement that everybody comply, the shareholder and the contractor comply with the house rules, particularly as to hours of work and days of work and access to the premises. You don't want work at 7 a.m. and you probably don't want work on a Sunday, possibly even a Saturday. you should have a provision in there that allows the cooperative's managing agent or representative to review the work while it's going on, and if there's a possible danger, to halt the work. As we've said, you don't want to touch the building systems. If there's plumbing that has to be stopped to make a change, you should have requirements for notice to the neighbors and to the building, and the managing agent should be on board. You might want to require that the shareholder or unit owner put up a security deposit to assure compliance. You might want to have an agreement to a fine if there isn't compliance. You obviously have to have a provision in there that there has to be compliance with all local laws, state rules, and municipal regulations. You have to have assurance that you've made provision for removal of trash, and presumably you won't need a dumpster, but if you do, you have to work with the board and the managing agent to make sure that you're going to place it in the proper fashion. And you should also have a method of getting the trash out of the building without destroying the elevator, without destroying the staircase, carpeting, and things of that nature. You want to have a provision for a completion date. You don't want the job going on forever, and that completion date should be reasonable and approved by the board. You want to, again, make sure that you only have licensed contractors. That is very important. In Westchester County, there are requirements for licensing. There are requirements in some of the municipalities, such as Yonkers, some of the local towns and villages for licensing, and you only want to use a licensed contractor. Again, there should be regular inspection, no changes to the building systems, and you want to have ultimately the board receive the evidence of completion. Now, in terms of the modifications that we now have as to COVID, COVID is what I consider the fourth entity or fourth participant in this, this contract basis now. Number one, you should have the shareholder understand, or the unit owner, that if work is going on in the apartment, there should be compliance with all the social distancing. Everyone should be masked. The workers should be not only masked, but make sure that they have gloves. If there's work going on in one part of the apartment, the shareholder should make sure that they are in another part of the apartment and at least 10 or 20 feet away, and hopefully in a different room completely. If they can, they should be out of the apartment at the time the work is going on. Remember, you're going to be having presumably a number of people going in and out, and they have to also notify the managing agent and make sure that there's appropriate notice and permission for them to come in and out of the building, and that at all times they are masked and gloved when they come in. All workers we should assure that all workers are questioned when they come in, and I don't know if the shareholder can, or unit owner can take temperatures, but certainly the contractor should make sure that its employees are not subject to temperatures having higher than 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit thermometer temperatures. They should also make sure that they haven't been in contact with anyone who has had COVID symptoms in the 14 days prior to going into the building or the apartment. They should make sure that they do not have the coughing or loss of smell or loss of taste. And all those aspects should be taken care of by the contractor to make sure its employees comply with all requirements of the construction industry, whether it be the physical distancing, the protective equipment. There should be an appropriate place in the apartment or the room or the building for cleaning and hygiene of the employees. You should have adequate communication and tracing if it turns out that there is somebody that is subject to the COVID or has been subject to the COVID in the past 14 days. We recommend that there be an agreement between the contractor, as we've said, and the shareholder, but that these days that agreement also include the fact that the shareholder should accept responsibility for not being COVID COVID liable, I guess, for a better word. They should not be subject to the disease at the time when they have contractors in, or they should not have been subject to the disease or anyone that had the disease for at least 14 days prior to allowing the contractor in. And that should all be set forth in writing between the contractor and the shareholder, and the co-op should be made aware of this and be given a copy of the contract. And I've said has to approve the renovation or work prior to it commencing. Tim, I think that's essentially what I have to say at this point. We certainly will be available for questions later on. If anyone has any questions, please write them down, and we'll talk about it after the other speakers have had their opportunity.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Ken. Our next speaker is supposed to be Charlie Marino. However, I'm having difficulty now seeing where he is within the list of participants. So Charlie, if you're there and can unmute yourself, we'll go ahead with you. Otherwise, we might just skip over you for the moment and go to Jason. Okay, hearing none. I think, Jason, are you there? I'm gonna unmute you. Jason, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, good. All right, so thank you very much for having me this evening. As David and Ken have expressed, unfortunately, insurance has gotten to be I would say, ridiculously big part of selecting contractors to do work at buildings, or it should be a ridiculously big part, because unfortunately it's that important, and there's that much risk involved for the condos and co-ops, especially if they don't pay attention to the details of the contractor's insurance policy. So I'm going to try and share my screen and go over some of the details here. 1 second. Okay, you know what? I know you've allowed me to do it, Tim, but there's
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Yeah, here we go.
There we go. Looks perfect.
Everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk through these bullet points very quickly, because I figure it's better to cover quantity rather than quality in this case to get all the points out. Most people by now have heard of the New York Scaffold Law. Simply put, it puts absolute liability on a building owner for an injury to a contractor employee, especially when a height-related injury is caused, like a fall from a ladder or scaffolding. So that puts unbelievable risk on the building, because the worker could be drunk or high on drugs or not wearing his safety equipment, and it's still the building's fault if that worker gets injured. So that's why premiums are so high in New York for liability, whether it be for a building or for a contractor. Also, many of you have seen that insurance premiums for umbrellas have gone up astronomically over the last couple of years, and that is a direct result of the Scaffold Law and these multi-million-dollar claims and settlements that have occurred recently, especially due to the social inflation and the dollar values involved in the last few years. I can tell you, when I got involved in insurance in New York 16 years ago, I mean, contractor insurance for condos and co-ops was rarely talked about. And now it's like the only thing talked about when you hire contractors. So the problem with hiring a contractor, many boards and managing agents, certainly not David's firm and many of the others that are part of the BRI, but many of the others, including the smaller ones, often think that as long as they have a certificate of insurance that lists the condo or co-op as an additional insured, that's all they need and they're covered. They love to see additional insured condo ABC on the certificate, and they think they're all set. But here is some wording from everyone recognizes this is the top of an insurance certificate. And this wording right in here, bold capitalized print, you can read it, but basically what it says is that the certificate of insurance means nothing, literally means nothing. It's basically just evidence that the contractor has coverage, but it doesn't convey additional insured status in and of itself to a condo or co-op. So if you've got the certificate, it's nice, looks good, doesn't mean much. This next cutout here is from a typical policy. Every policy will look a little bit different, but what this is additional insured where required by written agreement language that may or may not be in your contractor's policy. If it's in his policy or her policy, then as long as you have a written agreement with the contractor, it requires that the contractor name you as an additional insured, then that would be a trigger for coverage according to the policy terms. Because you can see it says here is who is an additional insured includes any person or organization for whom you, that's the contractor, are performing operations. In addition, is also additional insured when you or such person or organization have agreed in writing in a contract or agreement that such person or organization be included as an additional insured. So that's why the certificate by itself is not enough. You have to have a written agreement. Now, if you have the certificate of insurance and the written agreement, again, you might think, I'm good, I've got everything I need. Jason said these are the only two things I need, I'm golden. Unfortunately, again, not the case. David pointed out earlier, there's a carrier, a very prominent carrier with an outstanding insurance policy, and it's very economical, that has started to require that the insurance company, review the full insurance policies of every contractor working at buildings that they insure, condo or co-op that they insure. And the reason is because even if you have the certificate of insurance naming you additional insured, even if you have the written agreement saying that you're an additional insured, the contractor's insurance policy could still have one or several exclusions that would exclude coverage from the contractor's liability insurance policies in the event of an expensive claim such as a scaffold law claim. The exclusions might be an exclusion for claims arising from an employee of the contractor or an employee of the subcontractor of a contractor, or injuries caused by certain work such as work on the exterior of a building or work on a building that is over 5 stories, or roofing work. Or even if you're working let's say in the Bronx, the policy might have an exclusion for any jobs in the 5 boroughs of New York, so that wouldn't be covered. And you would never know this, and nobody would know this without reviewing the full insurance policy, every single page of it, to see if any of these exclusions were buried somewhere in the language. So that's why, unfortunately, these days, the only way to know the quality of the contractor's insurance is to actually get the full insurance policies and have your broker actually review the policies page by page. Some of the key policies that you should require of your contractor include general liability and umbrella or excess liability, workers' compensation, commercial automobile, even if they don't have company automobiles, because they may be using their personal automobile to come to or from the job, and they could cause an accident on the site. Possibly, depending on the type of work, also pollution liability. If they're digging and could be hit a previously undiscovered oil tank that had been abandoned, or professional liability if they're doing any design, build, or architectural work or engineering type work. And some of the key terms that you also should require in the written contractor agreement, and that should also show on the certificate are primary non-contributory coverage, waiver of subrogation so that they can't come back after the condo or co-op for liability after their policy is paid out, and completed operations coverage in case something goes wrong, like the building collapses after they replaced a structural beam like 6 months later. Certain types of work you should require higher limits of liability insurance. So if you've got somebody, again, hanging off of scaffolding doing brick pointing or waterproofing or on the roof, $1 million of liability insurance is not going to go too very far if somebody falls off the roof and is injured. You're looking most likely at a multi-million-dollar claim. So really $5 or $10 million minimum liability coverage it should be required for those types of work. Many contractors, I get a lot of boards coming to me and saying, hey, can we use this guy? They've got the liability insurance. And I say, okay, well, what about workers' comp? Oh, they don't need workers' comp. They say they're exempt. They even have a certificate from the state showing that they're exempt. The only company that can be exempt from workers' compensation is a sole proprietorship, a one-person entity. Many times you'll actually have a sole proprietor. He or she will get an exemption certificate, but he's going down to the corner every day to pick up workers that he's paying cash to help him or her out completing jobs. And in that case, even if he's paying cash, he's got employees, he's required by state law to have workers' comp. So aside from that, if the contractor doesn't have workers' comp, even if he is a true sole proprietor, you're just inviting a lawsuit. If the contractor gets hurt and doesn't have comp, more likely that he or his day worker will end up suing you. So I would never recommend using a contractor that says he's exempt for workers' comp. The point of all of this is, especially with bigger jobs, with some of the bigger jobs now that older buildings are now faced with having to do replacing roofs, brick pointing, garage work, major construction work, especially for those types of jobs where you're putting out a request for proposal. Don't put the request for proposal out without checking with your insurance broker on what insurance requirements should be in the RFP. I can't tell you how many times I get contacted by a building that we insure after they have put out the RFP, after they've selected the contractor, who almost always is the low bidder, the cheapest guy. One of the reasons he's the cheapest guy is because, like David said, he's working up on the roof and he's got an insurance policy that covers an interior carpenter and excludes roof work. But that's not known until you dig into the policy. So after I tell him, you can't use this guy, he's not covered, so you're not covered, now you have to go back through the whole process all over again and start from the very beginning. And if you thought you were going to have your project done in the summer and now it's the fall, you might be in trouble when the winter comes. So critical to have the information in the RFP properly. Just to point out, the same types of risks that we're talking about here for the condo or the co-ops work, frankly, they also exist for unit interior work for shareholder and condo unit owners. It's tough for some of these other buildings for some of these buildings, especially the garden style ones, to control this, because it's hard to know when work is going on, even though they're supposed to notify the board or the managing agent. Sometimes they don't, but I can tell you the risk is still there. So you should have some sort of process that requires the same type of insurance vetting. And then finally, to Ken's point about COVID-19, this is a tough one. There are likely, this is such a new to the world situation. Nobody can say for certain whether COVID-19 liability claims are going to be covered by the building's insurance policy. And we also don't know if contractor insurance policies will cover. Many of these policies have absolute exclusions for virus, and now even for COVID-19 exclusions. But even the ones that don't have exclusions that may be drawn upon in order for a carrier to deny coverage. So to Ken's point, it's best to have the contractor sign off on the agreement that he will follow the best practices and the state mandated practices for COVID. That's all I have.
Great, thank you so much, Jason. We're gonna try and bring in Charlie again. There are a couple of, again, it's not 100% clear which one he is. I'm gonna unmute the likeliest suspects here. Charlie, can you hear us, or can you unmute your phone or your computer? Let's see, no. All right, let me try one other doppelganger. Okay. No such luck. Let me try one.
Hello?
Oh, Charlie, is that you? Well, we did hear. Hey, there we go. Charlie, can you hear us? You are still on mute. Let me try and unmute you again.
Hey, how's that?
That's good. We can hear you loud and clear now.
All right. I don't know why it keeps going on the mute, but how are you, Tim? Sorry
Good,
about
good.
that.
No worries. We're glad you're here. You have the floor.
Oh, thank you, folks, and thank you for your patience. Can you hear me?
Just
I
fine. Yep.
I keep losing you. Okay. Anyway, my understanding is where are we going with contractors, board of directors, property managers, etc. And my key word here is transparency. You want to make sure that everybody that's involved in the process, the restoration process, knows what's going on, knows where they are, know what the costs are involved, and all the other factors as the other participants have discussed as far as insurance requirements and building code requirements and work permits, etc. What we typically do is, depending upon how big the project is, we want to make sure that the contract is in place. We usually use a standard form of AIA contract, American Institute of Architects contract, between owner and contractor. That delineates all of the, hello? You okay?
Yep, we can still hear you.
Okay. That delineates all of the details.
Oh. Now we can. Hold on, let's try and unmute you again. There you go. Now we can hear you.
Is that better? Okay.
Yep.
I don't know why it keeps muting. But, you know, everybody has to know what's happening on the job and what the type of work is, who the manufacturers are that are going to be supplying supplies for this job, how good is the contractor that's going to be doing the work. I know one of the questions that you had is about evaluating the contractor. Now, there are several contractors: electricians, plumbers, general contractors, waterproofers, roofers. So depending upon the type of work that you're doing, you want to get a contractor that is adept at doing this type of work. How many years of experience have you been doing roofing work? How many years of experience have you been doing plumbing work? And you want to make sure that the contractor has a good following. Even if the contractor was working for ABC company, that was a big company, and he decides to go out on his own, well, get all of that information. And then the other thing is that you want to make sure that you know about managing the cost of the work, both from your standpoint.
Charlie, you went on mute again. Can you unmute yourself? It just happened.
I don't know why it keeps doing that. I apologize, gentlemen. All right. So to me, because I'm on the board of my co-op and I go through this HAZA every time that I'm discussing a project, whether it be a boiler replacement or a roof replacement or whatever, everybody is concerned about dollars and cents. So you want to make sure that before you start a project with the contractor, that contractor is cognizant of all of the things that have to be done on the job, and that all of the possible extras that may come into play are included in there, and they should be ironed out before you start the job. You know, what type of roof are you going to use, Mr. Contractor? Well, we're going to use a bitumen roof, or we're going to use a rollout roof. It doesn't matter. You got to know what pricing that contractor has, because you don't want to have a lot of extras. I'm doing a project downtown. It's an exterior restoration project, and the GC has already submitted 6 change orders to the job, because there's been a lot of extras that have taken place. Everybody's fully aware of it, but it's additional work and additional cost to the co-op that took place as part of this ongoing process. So try to find out as much as you can from the contractor. Make sure that the contractor knows what he or she is doing, and that they know what costs are involved with this work. You want to know about cost overruns, because when the property manager comes back to the co-op and to the board that this all of this work is laid out for everybody in the building. Oh, we have to send out an assessment of $30 a month for the next 3 years. Nobody's going to like that, but you know, it may be part of the job moving forward. You also want to know, and it's very important, especially in these days with all of the different rules and regulations that we have with the building departments and the COVID and all of that other work that's happening, is that if there are any delays that are going to take place, the contractor should discuss that with the property manager, with the engineer or architect, if there is one on the job, with the board at some point. And if there's dollars and cents that are associated with that, we should know that from the contractor ahead of time. We don't want any surprises. That's the biggest single problem that we have when we're dealing with contractors, and also with boards that want to know what's happening. So I'll repeat the word again. Make sure you have transparency. If the contractor has a problem, for example, I have a project up in the Bronx, and guess what we found when we opened up the roof? We found that dirty A word. We found asbestos-containing materials. Well, that's an additional cost to the building, because that asbestos has got to be abated and remediated as far as getting rid of it legally. We talk about, checking the contractor's references, before they come on board. Typically what we do is we'll interview as few as, let's say, 3 contractors and as many as 6 contractors, just to get a concept of what this job is all about, what ideas they have, what the value of the job is. And as I always like to say, I like to see a horse race with the numbers. You know, if the numbers come in, somebody's at $1,000 and the next contractor's at $10,000 and the third one is at $100,000, we're in trouble. There's something that we've done wrong as the engineers, or maybe as the contractor, not figuring out the job. If you do, in fact, have a job that's $25,000 or $26,000 and maybe $30,000, that's a horse race. That's a good cluster of numbers. So you want to make sure that these contractors have all of their details presented to the condo or co-op boards, You want to make sure that the property manager has all of this information, and that the numbers are very clear and straightforward as far as lay people understanding what these numbers mean. Obviously, as has been said, I'm sure previously, you want to make sure that all of the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted insofar as the legal paperwork that's involved, the contract between the owner and the contract. You want to make sure, as we've all just heard, that the insurance certificates are all in place. And you want to make sure, obviously, you think we take it for granted, but you want to make sure that the contractor is in good standing with the municipality that the contractor is working in. Oh, I'm a great contractor. I work in all 5 boroughs in the city. Well, gee, we're up here in White Plains. We're up here in the Merrimack. We're here in Portchester. We have to make sure that those contractors are licensed with and have the proper insurances with the municipality that they're working in, or that we're all working in. One of the issues that was discussed, and I think I probably discussed this already, is, I'm a member of my co-op down in Yonkers, and what are the key components that we look for with a contractor? It's always, as the commercial says, it's price, price, price. You want to make sure that the contractor has the ability and the wherewithal to perform their tasks at hand, and that they have the experience to do it so that the job is done in a proper manner. We want to also check that if we have a current contractor, we want to check with that contractor to make sure that he or she can either meet or beat the pricing that a new contractor may come on board. I've been in the business for many, many years, so I understand and accept a lot of the contractors that I've worked with for 10, 15, 20 years. So if a new contractor comes on board, I have to make sure that that contractor has all of the things set up so that he can move forward with the work. All right, lastly, how often should the board of directors meet and check in with the contractor? Again, this depends upon how big a job it is. If it's a boiler job usually takes about 6 to 8 weeks to install. If you're on the board, just go downstairs, make sure that you're allowed to go into the boiler room, usually with the building superintendent, and check with the contractor. Typically, what I like to do, depending upon whether it's a small job or a large job, is meet with the contractor and the other participants, the property manager, et cetera, at least on a weekly basis, so that we have an update of what's happening. I just finished a fuel oil, an in-ground fuel oil installation in Portchester, and we were meeting about every 7 to 10 days. So you want to make sure that the board is kept up to date. We send out a newsletter to all of the board members if they don't participate, and everybody else. The property manager sends something out to the board members so we know what's happening. And that's pretty much it, folks.